Hello everyone, I'm Wave, and today I wanted to talk about a visual novel that I finished reading not too long ago, being Aster, which I would say is a very emotional visual novel that utilizes multiple different character perspectives in order to help build the world setting and make its story beats feel a little bit more impactful. So let's get into it. For this review, I want to say I'm probably going to try and split it into two separate segments. First segment being just for like general vibes and overall information on the visual novel, just so for people that don't really want any sort of spoilers whatsoever. And then the second segment of the video is probably going to have just very small details that I think is worth talking about in order to help you to go into it knowing what you can expect, but then also kind of describing my overall thoughts on the visual novel and why I feel like it's pretty impactful. And if you're wondering, why would I even need to, just to put it into perspective, this visual novel has two different versions of the OP. If you were to look up Aster OP on YouTube, you're probably going to end up finding the version that I want to say is from before the game released, which doesn't have any spoilers, and then the version that you're going to actually see in game does have spoilers. So I think if even the devs made sure to separate the spoilers from potential readers, I want to do so as well. But let's get into it. Aster uses 4 different groups of characters as the story unfolds, and you get to see how various events kind of affect those different parties. And I think it does help to just build the world and make it to where the story feels quite broad. I think in general too, the visual novel as a whole feels quite detailed. If you look at just the color palette, it has almost this gothic vibe to where there's a heavy use of dark black tones throughout a lot of the different character outfits, including the school uniform. So you see it for quite some time. I think a lot of other visual novels, if they're going to use black, it's of a lighter tone. This is the tone of black that they use. It really stands out, and it kind of helps paint this overall dreary sort of vibe when it comes to a lot of the time you're reading through Aster. It goes along with the character designs as well, to where you would think even because it has an anime style, there might be varying levels of oh, this person has pink hair and this person's got blue. No, every character in Aster has a natural hair color, and along with their outfits and the uniforms that they're wearing, it kind of does make the overall vibe of Aster feel quite different probably from a lot of other visual novels you might be used to reading. But also I think when it comes to their choice in color palette, I've talked about it on the channel before, being able to use hot and cold colors. Aster, I would say, uses a lot of bright and darks when it comes to, I've said, with black, but then also being able to utilize pink as a more vibrant color, to where when you see kind of accents of brighter colors, but then also once you get into later on into designated chapters for the story, you might have certain scenes that use a lot more vibrancy, which makes it to where the overall weight on you, the reader, kind of lifts because of how much of the visual cues are kind of doing a lot of heavy lifting in that regard. Along with that, I think overall Aster is quite detailed, in addition to kind of how it uses color palettes and how it uses multiple perspectives. It also utilizes multiple different seasons as well. So it's not a story that feels like it is trapped within certain week or month within the story. It unfolds over time, and you're able to see as these characters grow what kind of events happen throughout. And that's something that we can probably talk about once I get into the second segment as well. But then also, I guess I will also talk about something that I think is important to talk about, even though it wasn't too in the way, being technical difficulties when it came to reading Aster. Unlike some other visual novels that I read where maybe I ran into issues translation wise when it came to text extractor, I didn't have any issues with that, but I actually came into very like small instances of technical difficulties with the visual novel itself. It happened once, but there was a scene where character sprite appeared on screen, and then there was like this kind of like screen tearing in a way to where you could see like the outer boundary box of the sprite because there was like a little bit of an outline that was being shown over the background. And then also the more prominent issue that I had, which probably only ever affected maybe like 10 minutes of gameplay, and I realized that you could just reload whatever your save was, or you could close out of the game if you really wanted to. But what happens is that very rarely Aster would have like issues when it came to the soundtrack that was playing, to where I noticed it a lot when I was just like first booting into the game, but sometimes when you're transitioning to a scene, all of a sudden the soundtrack that plays gets distorted. If I remember correctly, I actually recorded a little bit of an instance, so I could probably go ahead and play that for maybe not too long because it is kind of grating on the ears. But yeah, so it's something that happened quite rarely, and there was a pretty easy fix for it, but it was like, if you were to read through that whole scene with the very like grating music, it would fix itself automatically once you get to the next scene where like there's a transition and the music changes. But also, like I said, you could reload and it will fix it, but it was something I figured was worth talking about. Now I guess I'll go ahead and I will give people that don't want any little bit of spoilers to go ahead and leave the video now. And for people that want to continue, I'm going to give you a couple seconds and we will talk about a very minor bit of spoilers, but I would like to think that you probably will know what I'm talking about as soon as I say it. So let's talk about kind of like story beats and something that is quite important when it comes to the tone of Aster. The way that they show the story between different perspectives is because how Aster is structured is that it is a kinetic visual novel. There are absolutely zero choices throughout the entirety of the visual novel. When you first boot into Aster, you're going to be playing as probably the most prominent main character, and how that works is you're going to play through their chapter and you're going to get towards the end, and what happens is that there will be some sort of incident or tragedy that occurs, and upon that tragedy we get to see that OP that has various amounts of spoilers, and then we are booted back out into the title screen. And when you get to the title screen, you're going to see 3 more chapters unlock on the outer edge of the logo for the game, and when you click on any of these chapters, it then takes you to a different perspective for somebody that lives within the town, and being able to see how they are impacted by that tragedy that occurred at the end of your first read through. Really, like as you play through every single chapter, you get more and more information for like what exactly happens, and like you get to, as the reader, piece things together to be able to like figure out, like I said, what happens, and then also being able to really feel the weight of this one incident, to where you get to see how not even like just the main character that you're going to be seeing the story through, but also being able to see multiple different side characters and how they interact with various other people within the town, and being able to see how characters go ahead and go about trying to like heal from the pain that happens. And I think combined with a lot of the, like I said, tone and how they utilize various like color palettes and music as well, it really makes the visual novel as a whole feel more like serious and more grounded, to where whenever you boot into Aster for like a read session, you automatically kind of like feel this weight being put upon you. But I found it to be quite like engaging, and I really wanted to read more. What happens is that once you've finished up reading the 3 other chapters, you're then going to be transitioning back into like I said, the main protagonist that you started the game off. And upon the conclusion of that person's chapter, you get booted back out to the title screen once again. And I remember really wanting to read more because just like I was really enjoying reading Aster. And luckily for me, one thing I didn't know was that like when I went into Aster, a lot of the like people on the Japanese side were saying that Aster is a really, really phenomenal, like, I guess a lot of people like to use the word precious when it comes to like storytelling on the JP side, but a lot of people all agreed and said that there was like one route in particular that was just like egregiously bad. And to me, I actually didn't feel that way at all. I felt like all of the different character perspectives were done quite well, but the thing that I didn't see anyone talk about was that upon completing those 4 different character perspectives and you get booted out of the title screen, you might be like, okay, well, one, I still have CGs that are like have not been seen yet. And secondly, I still haven't seen the credits. And similar to the first iteration, when you get booted to the title screen, you're gonna now see even more chapters pop up alongside the outer edge of the game's logo. And it is for like full-blown after stories for each and every single one of the character perspectives, and I was really excited. I would say, like, if you are going to read Aster, please read the after stories. It's not like a lot of other visual novels where it's probably a very short like sequence that has an extra H scene that's buried under the extras menu. This is on the title screen, and I was quite surprised, but also very glad that when I clicked on it and was reading for probably like a good 20-30 minutes, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is like it's going on even further. So Aster, I think before getting into the after stories, felt like maybe a 20-something hour visual novel, and it becomes even more expansive once you unlock those after stories and you get to sit down for several hours more for each character perspective and see like further on and how they finally like resolve their issues and, you know, get towards the end. And like I said earlier, like resolve and heal from the pain of the tragedy that occurs towards the earlier portion of the story. And so I think when you go into Aster 2, you might be kind of like really going into it expecting heavy doses of like sadness and having it to where you're going into it expecting to like cry, I guess. But at the same time, I like that when you get to maybe something that is sort of like hyped up, I guess, if you really dig into people that have read Aster and see what they would consider to be some of the heights of the story, you can get to those portions and feel like there still is more and more and more to experience when it comes to Aster, and being able to have these like very like nice contrasts between the more like heavier atmosphere when it comes to Aster and then having those more like uplifting and like calming moments where maybe you're just kind of like going around town, maybe overall vibes of just talking to people like as passerby, or like, I don't know. I think Aster has a really good shift in tone between having it to be quite heavy and also being able to have moments where you are either like just feeling a bit more natural, but then at the same time, like I said too, with how they use color palettes in the moments where there is like brighter usage of color, and being able to have moments where it feels, I guess, like I said, with how the Japanese audience describes it, precious moments in the visual novel. But yeah, overall, I did enjoy my time with Aster. I'm very glad that I decided to go ahead, sit down, and read it. And I would say is worth your time for those of you that are watching this video that think that that kind of like tone and vibe is something that you've been looking for. But yeah, those have been my thoughts on Aster, a very emotional visual novel. I've been Wave. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.